Donc, nous allons conclure cette matinée avant la remise du trophée de nutrition. Donc,
this morning before
avec les industriels, les
the
patrons de l'industrie
award ceremony.
agroalimentaire
We have here a number of
je remercie les sociétés
industry
Nestlé,
managers.
Fleury-Michon,
We'd like to
Seb,
thank Nestlé, Fleury-Michon, Seb, Atlantic Santé, and more to be with us this morning.
Je vais laisser Jean-François
And I
Desessarts
will
animer cette table ronde.
let the microphone to Jean-François Desessarts.
Valérie. Bonjour à tous.
Thank you,
Alors, je vais
Valerie,
déjà vous
and
présenter
good
les
morning.
participants
Let me
de la
first of all
table
introduce
ronde.
to you the participants of this roundtable.
Là-bas, Nathalie
At the far end, we have
vous êtes la fondatrice d'Atlantic Santé.
Nathalie Hutter-Lardo. You are the founder and manager of Atlantic Santé. For those of you who don't know, Atlantic Santé is a communication agency dedicated to nutrition. Next to her is Mr. Delabarre, Mathieu Delabarre. He's a sociologist, an expert in food stuff and nutrition, and a professor with the University of Dijon. We have then Jean-Philippe Girard, the chairman of ANIA and of Eurogerm. We have Philippe Crévoisier, the general manager of the SEB company. And then we have Barbara Bidon from the Fleury-Michon company. She's the manager for health and sustainable nutrition. And Nathalie Martin, the representative for Nestlé, which is working at the Lausanne Research Center. And you chair a group called Sensory Sciences and Consumer Sciences. Let's take one first question. All over this conference, we heard various words like pleasure, health, consumers, trends. So, how about pleasure and health? Let me immediately turn to the sociologists. Have these two words always been associated, or is this a fairly new notion?
Je ne suis pas totalement sûr qu'ils soient associés aujourd'hui à l'époque contemporaine.
Well, I am not so sure these two words have been combined right nowadays, but that was the case in the past, and since the antique times, we can see it throughout the Middle Ages and the Renaissance period. Obviously, a cookbook is first and foremost a book of health, a book of healthy recommendations, which may seem strange to us because today we speak of diet, etc. But I think the characteristic of our modern food is the split between the rationale. Of course, there are common points, as we could see with the various trends, but a cookbook in the Middle Ages combines both health and nutrition. Now, today we also have this convergence between health, nutrition and pleasure, but there are also some tensions. I'd like you to explain why you didn't like the word consumer. You rather use the word eater. Well, this is, I would say, a little trick, a sociologist's trick. In fact, the eater is more than just a simple eater. As we saw during the various presentations, the eater is someone with various practices, usages, routines, who's part of a culture, and who is individual. You know that in our modern society, individualism is very important. And so this eater is also part of a group, a social group. So I rather use the word eater than consumer because it covers these notions, whereas the word consumer to me is perhaps a little more restrictive. Mr. Girard, as the chairman of the ANIA, what does the words pleasure and health mean to you? Is this a requirement? Well, I agree with my colleague next to me. We are really working on these three lines, and this is very specific to France and the French food model. We try to reconcile both pleasure with the health It's a real concern. We have the three major meals, breakfast, lunch and dinners, where we try to have some exchanges, and we try to set the limits between what's bad and what's not so bad. So we really have now a threefold concern about health, nutrition and pleasure. So if we're ahead with these three ideas, we would certainly be ahead of an expecting consumer who may sometimes worry about what he is being fed and how he eats that. So this is something that could be very important for understanding tomorrow's consumers. Well, if we remember Professor Erzberg's presentation yesterday, we have to find the right balance between health and pleasure. In some cases, the healthy aspect can sometimes overcome the pleasure aspect. Well, Professor Ekberg has presented very interesting leads. Some people accuse me of being against him. Of course, I am not against him, but he has among his propositions, there are 5 that we believe are very interesting, with the National Plan for Nutrition and Health, which offers a greater transparency. I think this is something we cannot be against. We cannot, of course, disagree with this idea. We have a duty to transparency, to quality, to information. Now, when it comes to a nutritional profile, I am a little more worried because we may have good or bad products. If they are bad, overtly bad, we can ban them from the market. But I'd rather speak of an excess in insufficiencies. Eating 3-4 square of chocolates is fine. Eating a full plate is, of course, excess. Now, the idea of having the traffic light system, to me, is also something which I believe is dangerous. If I talk to an Italian, if you want to eat pasta, you'll give a green light, but if you add butter, cheese and tomato sauce onto it, which color will you give your pasta dish? So, you know, it's like camembert. 1 share of a camembert is good, but half the camembert is bad. So, to me, this is perhaps a bit excessive. Nathalie, you have something like 50,000 to 100,000 consumers phoning you each year. What is the message you get from them? Well, the consumer has a fairly negative vision about what is being fed. There are many questions about palm oil, organic food, etc. And it would be interesting to have more transparency to explain that there are nothing such as a good product or a bad product. It's just the best way we can use these products, which counts. So many messages today which are conveyed by the media seem to be negative, whereas the relation between health and nutrition should be seen as a positive factor rather than a negative one. We know that eating better offers advantages in terms of health. And we can demonstrate that. We have the tools to demonstrate that, to evidence that.
Chez Nestlé. Alors, comment vous répondez, vous qui êtes plutôt en amont du marché?
So you were with Nestlé. So you're somewhat upstream of the customer's request. How do you meet the demand for pleasure and health? Well, these are two obvious linked elements, and we try to meet the customer's requirements on these 2 aspects. We first try to explain the customer what is being eating with nutritional information for 100 grams by explaining the role of the product as part of the daily food intake or as part of a meal. And this is something that was mentioned in the documents that were presented in this conference binder or set of documents. Depending on your age, there are, of course, things that may vary. So we work a lot on communication. We also work a lot on the product range, the offer actually, the supply. We have a system called 60-40 plus. So the idea being to improve the sensory quality of products, because for 60% of consumers, they like a product because of the sensory properties, the 40% remaining percent being more interested in the nutritional value. And this is also why we decide to launch products on the market. We use these two criteria. And the last is, of course, about research. So pleasure and health are obviously two elements that we combine in our research work. Barbara Bidon, what do you do at Fleury Michon? Well, it is about the same type of approach as Nestlé, but we always try to understand the societal expectations and meet them with public health expectations. So we always try to work on the actual formulation of our products with less fat, less additives, but we have a commitment. We always want to make sure that we have a good processing of these products to avoid the degradation in the taste, because you may have perhaps higher quality products, but if you don't have the right taste of the product, you'll run into a failure. So we're very careful about the formulation. So we also work on information to consumers, and third, as a brand, we always try to follow the consumers' trends. We heard that with Ipsos, but I also heard something with Credoc last year. It seems that the French are changing their food and are no longer following the conventional system of 3 meals a day. There is one Frenchman out of 3 has no breakfast. Adolescents, teenagers sometimes just have one full meal for lunch and then keep nibbling or snacking. So we try to reconsider our supply to fit in with these new behaviors and new lifestyles. And of course, it changes our recipes, so we have to change the nutritional density, if I may say, of our products. We also work on in the area of satiety, as we heard yesterday, so it's a permanent and constant evolution, taking into account all these phenomena, knowing that at the end of the day, what the consumer wants is to feel relaxed and forget about being controlled or being banned some elements, and not having to follow the indications of the traffic light system, for example.
Quel est votre avis sur cette étude? Vous avez retrouvé
What is your opinion about the Ipsos survey that was presented before this morning? Well, we fully agree. We have the same need for being reassured. This is nothing new with us. We know that we still have a lot of work to do on this. We want to reassure people about the origin of our products, about the way in which they are being processed, etc. So this is a strong requirement from customers. And there's a need of personalization. The need is to have perhaps a distinctive supply with specific products. We have worked hard, for example, on food allergies, on the various intolerance or diabetes, for example, products suitable for diabetic patients. So this kind of offer meets specific needs indeed, and that's highly interesting, because this means that we have to have a very individual type of offer for our customers. Now, there's also an aspect which I heard about this morning. Everything that has to do with connected devices may be important. We heard that it was not so popular in France, but I'm sure that for the future there will be a relationship between the people's behavior and the connected assistance. Well, Monsieur Crovoisier, we could perhaps hear you on the subject of connected devices because you have a specific platform of reflection on the subject. I don't know whether you attended the early morning session, but what can you say about connected devices? Well, thinking of connected ideas, the basic idea is to try to offer the customer a ready-made solution on his plate or her plate. So for this we have a product and a know-how. By know-how I mean the recipe, the cooking recipe. And this is what gives us the end result. As Jean-Philippe said, a pasta is one thing, but if you add tomato sauce on top of it, it's not the same dish. So it's the combination of products, ingredients, and processing or cooking that provides us with the results which pleases us or not. Now, connected devices, what about them? They will certainly help refine the process and individualize the process. Being connected doesn't mean much. It only means something if you can have your profile logged in and therefore be able to set the parameters in function of your taste, for example. And then we can combine with pleasure. But we can also, of course, include the various health parameters that need to be further integrated. So we have started some surveys on the subject, and we have shown that all such elements have indeed an important influence. So everything that goes digital in this area will suddenly allow two things. First of all, the consumer will be able to cook in an easier manner because it will be helped, assisted. It will not so much fear to miss his recipe or to have leftovers, etc. That's a way of telling consumers, you can do it. Yes, you can, so to speak. So this is going to help the consumer to regain a self-confidence and obtain good quality, good results. And at the end of the day, we can also offer more services. That's the very important point, and in particular in the field of nutrition. Seb launched the so-called ActiFry cooker. I heard it was in the framework of the first or second Vitagora conference. What is ActiFry? Is this both pleasure and health? Absolutely. The idea was to work on the end result. At that time, we were working on deep fryers. We were one of the leading producers of deep fryers, and obviously the market for deep fryers were decreasing year after year. So the idea was not to think a new deep fryer. We then decided to think out of the box and to think, in fact, of the end results on the plate. The consumers still love French fries. The problem is that they no longer want them to be fat. So the idea was to provide them with the real taste of a French fry without the fat. This is how we came to develop the ActiFry cooker or fryer. And this has been very successful. Well, Actifry was just one product by then, but we continued working with other partners like Le Sieur, an oil producer, to develop a specific oil which really offers excellent results with Actifry. And then we also worked on an application. So we know an application that integrates various services. It's called My Actifry, and the consumer can then have a kind of schedule that fits his or her profile. And from the results we already have, it seems that this is very, very interesting. In fact, we may wonder about the use of a connected device, okay, but once you've had a taste of it, I think you'll find it hard to forget about it. Mr. Girard, I don't know whether you attended the early morning presentation with Ipsos. What do you think about connected devices? Well, that's life. I mean, we have to live with the current zeitgeist. In fact, consumers like our products, but they don't like our factories. This is a bit of a paradox, because this is where we can produce our offer. But we can even go farther than this. In fact, in the future, we will obviously work with connected food, so to speak. We'll go indeed a major step ahead. We get information, we'll have to sort out information. ANIA, which is the National Associations of the Foodstuff Industry, insists on being transparent to consumers, in providing the consumer with the right information. So the smartphone is the device to obtain any information whatsoever on a given product. How to cook it, for example. Last week, we had a meeting on various applications, like how to cook without leftovers. This is very important. This is what a connected cooking can help you with. Same thing when you lack inspiration to prepare a meal, you can get information from your smartphone. With a bit of courage, of course, but it means that you'll get ideas, cooking ideas, and I think it is fantastic. We are offering consumers a reply in line with their change in lifestyle, with a real interest on a taste and quality of life. Now, the study that was presented this morning evidenced as well that the French seem to be pretty reluctant to connect a device. Well, yes, we were all reluctant to use a smartphone or an iPad just a few years ago, so I'm not very much worried. I think we are totally into this era, and if you combine the visual aspect, we will certainly be very willing to go ahead with this model. I think consumers need just a little more time to digest all this. Nathalie, what is your feeling about connected device? What do your consumers tell you about connected devices? Well, we worked along with SEB and medical research. In fact, connected device bring in ideas, help you better prepare your meals, have a healthier food. So consumers, or eaters as you call them, who followed the study, improved their food intake, because they were given not only recipes but also utensils, and this has a direct effect on health. So it's a positive spiral which will allow to forget about the negative effects and to go beyond the factors that we don't want to think about today, but to just remember about the positive aspects of food, and by using the positive liver effects. Mr. Delabarre, you told me about eaters or consumers that are altogether multiple-faced, if I may say, and complex. Absolutely. One of the fundamental characteristics which has been highlighted by the study that was the survey that was presented this morning is that the eater is not a single dimension person. So you can look for more practicality and rationality, but still look for authenticity and look for gastronomy and culinary pleasure. We can say the same for health, actually. So I believe that we have a multifaceted eater today, but this eater is someone with functional registers focused on authenticity, on roots, on dietary intake, on body fitness, etc. In my view, these various elements are not always compatible. There may be some tensions. So we heard questions this morning on the subject about the possible paradoxes. Altogether, we have people who do not want to follow a diet, to take a diet, but altogether who keep measuring whatever they do and eat. We want to have local relationships with the farmer, the farm to fork movement, for example, and altogether cook differently. So some sociologists call this the hypermodernity. As an eater, we want to have something handy, like a pizza, something that won't have you lose time cooking, etc. But altogether, you may lose time, so to speak, in preparing a nice meal for your friends or follow some training with a chef, etc. So we can have an interplay between these different blocks, if I may say, but this is not always necessary, because we have to understand that the eater understand this complexity. There is not one single track to follow, but several tracks, multiple tracks, which can sometimes appear contradictory. Let's move back to research. The research which is undertaken on the subject of health and pleasure. Nathalie Martin, you told me that your works were about anticipating what can help the consumer to have a better food, to eat better food. Indeed, and I can give you some concrete examples of our research work. This is very much in line with what we heard yesterday. Our objective is to help the consumer in his or her decisions for healthy food and for rational choices. Of course, there are many ingredients in the products that help them be pleasant, like fat, sugar, salt. So they're not so positive from the nutritional point of view, they're just good for the taste. So one of the bases of our research was to try and decrease the amount of such ingredients, but yet preserve the sensory properties of the food and therefore maintain the pleasure of eating. This was mentioned a lot yesterday. When I joined the Nestlé Research Center 10 years ago, most of our activities were related to sensory interactions, to better understand what could be the impact of, for example, odors and taste, or texture and taste, etc., so as to try and reduce fat, sugar, salt in our products and yet maintain the sensory properties or qualities. Now, there were many examples mentioned by Mr. Steiger yesterday concerning texture. We also have been working a lot on texture to understand, for example, how those compounds that may induce sensory perceptions may alter perception. So by just changing the structure of the product, we can have a different perception and still get the same pleasure with perhaps lower quantities of products. In the same way, we have worked on satiety and on how to offer consumers dishes or meals with a little restricted amount of calories, but still offer satiety. Actually, we obtained quite interesting results because there are very many intercultural differences. This was mentioned as well in this conference. I'm thinking, for example, of the difference between a Frenchman, a French person who's expecting pleasure from eating something. Pleasure is obviously the basis of the reflection for a Frenchman, whereas an American thinks of food as being functional and has suspicion if the food is too good. Because the American thinks that if it is good in taste, it may be bad for health. So we don't have the same perception depending on the culture. And when it comes to satiety, we did work on a lot of sensory characteristics, and we worked, for example, on the various characteristics, what you feel as to, with respect to the structure of the food, the texture of the food, how long do you have to chew it, for example. Then we also consider the structure that are such that you'll have to keep the food in your mouth for a longer period of time, etc. So we worked on liquid and semi-liquid products, but also on solid foodstuff. And altogether, we were able to come up with new formulations with lower calorie intake. But at the end of the day, the consumer knows that he gets some pleasure, and that's part of the overall satisfaction. The consumer knows that he'll be full up and will not have to heat a second portion. And one last example to illustrate the combination of health and pleasure, because this is in fact the key point, isn't it, is to also consider the visual impact of the products, yet with a lower caloric intake. In fact, all the visual characteristics of foodstuff, the shape, the color, the distribution of the ingredients on the plate, this was presented yesterday quite interestingly, all this will have a repercussion on the customer's expectation, including in terms of satiety. We know that the quantities served determine what you're going to eat, in particular in France. So it's not so much a question of education, because you were told in the past to finish everything that's on your plate. So the quantity that is being served, the portion served, is to be eaten up. Therefore, the importance of visual characteristics about the quantities to be served, but also the expectations in terms of satiety. Or an effective satiety. So these are tracks for, or leads for research. You talked about observational research. Yes, we have many examples, and we heard that with Dominique Valentin this morning. In parallel to other conventional approaches, which consist in interviewing consumers through focus groups, questionnaires, etc., we collect more and more observations. And in particular at home, in the consumer's home. So we just send the camera, we ask the consumer to locate the camera at the right spot, so there's no one else. There's no person present, physically present. It's just a video camera that is located for us to access information that we might not get through the simple statements collected from consumers. Not so much because the consumer would lie or would perhaps conceal a few elements, but in most cases because the consumer is not even aware of his or her behavior. And we can see huge discrepancies between statements and behaviors. You had a poster on display here on the interaction between mother and children. We observed, for example, mothers with children from 6 months to 3 years and the various interactions occurring over a meal. And we observed huge discrepancies between what mothers reported or about what they believe they did and what they actually do. So this allowed us to have a true picture. This is about the so-called non-articulated needs. And this is what the customer does, the consumer does without being aware of it. And this helps us offering the consumer something more relevant. And to get back to the idea of being connected and using several applications, the interest of this is that we can not only communicate through booklets, etc., but also through videos, through images. We can show a video to the consumer, which is in most cases much more expressive than reading a plain text. And mothers are in need of such kind of information. For example, when introducing veggies in the infant's diet, how can you make sure the infant will like it?
Barbara, same thing for Fleury-Michon. What do you do ahead of time in terms of research in order to meet this pleasure and health requirement? Well, we don't have the same means as Nestlé, so our approach is much more of a field approach, an intuitive approach. Our research focuses on nutritional aspects of products, of course. So we've worked in that field quite a lot. And today we're focusing especially on behavior and notions that take us beyond the field of health, because consumers are interested in pleasure, the pleasure of eating something, but choosing food is also about making societal choices. Foods can be linked to different things. They have to be good to eat and good to think about. And we've worked a lot upstream with our suppliers and with our producers and with the different people that we work with in terms of animal food and our ham. We also work on environmental aspects. We look at the environmental impact of our packaging. We do a lot of research on social impacts as well. What relationship do we have with our suppliers, with our employees? These are things that are important. So we don't just focus on the food itself. We try and have an overall vision. When people buy a product, it's important that product to be good, but that product has to reflect values, the values of the company, of the people working with that company. So this is it takes us back to the idea of coming back to our roots. Behind a product, you have a company, and that company has a personality. So that's what we focus on in our research. So having said that, you do some great things in your industries. And Mr. Gérard, you're saying that the consumer is a little bit worried. He's a little disturbed. Why? Is there a problem with communication? Are industrialists seen in a terrible way? And yet at the same time we're consuming everything that comes out of the food industry, but we criticize it at the same time. Well, there are many things that can be said. There are many programs on the television about this. I don't know whether we should draw the link between what we see in the media and on the television and what consumers say or how they act. So whether you're an individual company, a small to medium-sized company, or a group, there is the pride of producing something that is the same. The idea of putting something on the market that is in line with the consumers' expectations. So today, people are talking more about savor rather than taste. So there is an old saying, you know, too much salt kills and no salt kills too. I think that's, you know, it's a truth. People have told us to hide salt, sugar, fat contents. But no, that's not what we're doing today. We are fully aware of what our products do to our human bodies, and I don't know one company today that's not working on nutritional improvement, a sensory aspect, taste, pleasure. All companies are working in these fields, and they're going to continue to work in those fields. I think that what we need to do today is to change the image, change that image. We need to open up our doors so that people can come and visit our companies and understand that there is a vocation behind the company, whatever the size it is. There is a demand, there is a request for accessibility for a certain price. And these things are taken into account by companies. We need to come back to transparency, communication, and you're right. Very often, companies have great stories, and those stories should be shared. Now, we talked about salt, but there's also sugar that you get in jam. That sugar has a technical role, but it also produces pleasure. Over 50% sugar in jam may be frightening, but it is a great preservative sugar. So, you know, we've got to find the kind of happy medium in relation to knowledge and how knowledge is developing, knowledge of the consumer, the way the consumer thinks, the way the consumer acts. These are things that we need to work on so that we provide more transparency. Natalie, would you like to say something? Yes, I'd like to talk about pride in our products. Pride felt by industrialists. Industrialists have to be part of the solution. They are there to meet the problems of society today, whether we're talking about malnutrition or deficiency or obesity in industrialized countries. By basing their innovation and communication on these aspects, by basing all of these things on science, not just nutritional science, but physiology, and a better understanding of behavior, that's the road ahead. If I may just interject and say something about this very fundamental question. We're talking about lack of trust, criticism in the industry. I think that unfortunately this is a characteristic that is specific to our contemporary food circumstances. It's not just a question that concerns food. There has been some kind of externalization. Eaters who control things from farm to fork. There are a number of modern movements, and many tasks have been made external. So there is a strong feeling that there is a loss of control. The problem is when it's a loss of control in relation to aeroplanes, cars, electricity, that's not really a problem. But when it comes to food, which is symbolic, it's private, it's something that goes into our bodies, there the dimension takes on a much stronger aspect. So there is a lot of criticism because it's food. And it's not the fault of the food industry. It's specific to food. Eaters, individuals want to control what they're putting in their bodies, and that's why there are these movements, back to our roots, etc. We're seeing the same dimension in relation to diets. Here again, the individual wants to control what they're putting in their body. So there's the idea of really being able to control. Instead of other people making decisions for you. So it's that dimension. It's a very complex dimension, but it's something that will stay. I think objectively we've got healthier food, we're eating in a more diversified way. There are health issues that are emerging that we didn't have in the past, but this experience of losing control over something will be reflected in criticism systematically. So you're saying that people have the impression that they're being manipulated, and you said that consumers are not cultural idiots. Yes, but that's something else. That's in relation to consumers' vision or thinking. They know that there's marketing, advertising, that there's industry, that things are imposed on them. But the simple fact that consumers are critical of the food industry reflects that they are not being manipulated. Actually being able to think that they might be manipulated is a reflection of the fact that they are resistant to such manipulation. So that's the whole paradox. People criticize, but they consume at the same time. So this means that eaters, individuals, step back from this feeling of loss of control. So they're not cultural idiots in the sense that they're not determined by a message. I don't think it's the food industry or the context in terms of public policy or health policy that determine every behavior. No, it's multifaceted. The consumer has requests. There's an interaction in both directions, I would say. Nathalie, yes, I'd like to talk about this loss of control and the fact that everything is made external. But there are two areas used by consumers. First of all, the consumer is buying back into food. There are behaviors that are juxtaposed. We're seeing the consumers cooking again, but also eating out. And there are positive effects that can be seen in factory visits. Consumers who can go in to factories and see what is behind the food that they buy. And we can see the impact in terms of image. It's really exceptional. When they feel that they take back control, their image of the company is much more positive. After visiting a factory, it's rare that a consumer will say, it's exactly what I thought. So there is this buyback and the question of transparency. We need to open up factories, open the doors of factories so that there can be more visits. Barbara, yes, I just wanted to add to what Nathalie was saying. We've started an experiment recently. We've decided to open up our factories so that people can come and look at crab sticks, crab sticks being a subject of big debate. People don't really know, what a crab stick comes from. And so the challenge was say, well, come and check for yourselves. Come and see for yourselves. We'll take you to Alaska. So we invited journalists and consumers to see how we catch our fish in Alaska. Then we organized a series of visits in the Vendée region in France. And obviously, it's important to have interactivity and exchange because there is this mistrust because of a lack of knowledge, because people are not familiar with certain worlds. So it's extraordinary. Consumers understand that we can't be perfect everywhere all the time. So the idea is to make sure that they see that we are making efforts to improve the way we do things. That's the most important thing. We really believe in transparency, in opening up our doors and explaining the way we go about things and make our food. Transparency, opening up of doors, what do you think? Oh, we have to. We have to. We are all consumers. Children, friends, when you invite friends around, you want to offer them the best. So we need to be transparent. So we've already, made progress, and knowledge is changing. Only just last week, we were talking about obesity and the relationship with products. Now we're talking about saliva. survivor. There's a real challenge. We have a specialist in Dijon who discovered what we know about saliva 10 years ago. You know, taking time to eat, that's one of the first responses to the obesity problem. It's true that a lot of people eat too quickly, and we forget what we're eating. We're already moving on to the future while we're actually eating. We're thinking ahead about what we're going to be doing. So that is the first thing that we have to think about, the consumer. The consumer must be at the heart of our thinking. We therefore owe the customer transparency. We owe the customer this opening of doors. I think it's important to make sure that you have some kind of visitors area in your company. It's great. You've got the before and after the visit. You use different words, but it's true. There is the before and the after the visit. This is something that should be very much promoted as the basis of the future of the food industry. Natalie, you talked about research, Barbara too. Is there still a lot to do, would you say? Is it an area where we're going to make a lot of progress still? Is there, you know, well, I think in terms of the understanding of consumer behavior, yes, we have a lot of ground to cover. In Nestlé, this is something that we're focusing on in partnership with academic experts in the field. This is research that we're seeing in the academic world as well. If we take the example of Dijon, I'm familiar with Dijon, especially with the Taste Center in Dijon. 15 years ago, we had more research on sensory perception than on the consumer. Today we have laboratories that are interested in the behavior of children, the behavior of elderly people. So there is a lot that is changing, and we realize when we look at children's behavior, and I've been here since the beginning of the week, and on Monday and Tuesday there was the closing of a European project. Sylvie from the Taste Center coordinated it. It was called the Habit Project, and it was about strategies to be implemented and tried out in order to try and encourage the children to eat vegetables. So it was a European project involving 8 or 9 teams at European level. And the idea was really to test different strategies to encourage children to eat vegetables, because this was becoming a public health problem. So there were different strategies. Some came out as being obvious strategies. For example, introducing variety at a very early stage in childhood, when, you know, additional foods are being introduced. This research is research that industrialists like Nestlé is trying to transpose into its range of products, notably in baby food. We've opened up that range of baby food. We've included a lot more vegetables, not necessarily vegetables that are easy to cook, you know, things like aubergines and artichokes, but it's also to make the food more diverse, so that there is a focus on taste, because the main vegetables need to be recognized in terms of taste. If in a baby food pot you've got carrot and artichoke, well, it's important that the children can recognize the taste, so that they can, their taste buds are opened up. Because we follow groups of children, and some research was initiated in Dijon in this field. And we know that if we have variety introduced very early on, there is a greater acceptance of vegetables at the age of 3 years. So that's one strategy. And we could also educate parents through communication measures, by working with health professionals in order to encourage vegetable diversity. There's another strategy that works well, and it works just as well given that, you know, there are other mechanisms, you know, if you take the flavor of artichoke, which has a very distinct flavor and is not very well accepted, if you associate it with something nice, like something sugary, something sweet, that works just as well as associating the artichoke with something else. It's a bit like hiding the vegetable with another taste, hiding it in something else in order to encourage vegetable intake. So the results show that the approach that involves insisting at least 8 times on the child eating the vegetable is important. Barbara? What kind of room for progress have we yet to cover? Where are we just at the start? Whereabouts are we in terms of research? Well, we work on various fields, and what we haven't seen with raw products is the progressive transition in terms of the economic problems. So these are subjects that we're just beginning to look at. It's when you are involved in the meat industry, it's difficult to move on to the vegetable sector. So these are things that we have still to look at, and our idea is not necessarily to move towards revolutionary things. We're focusing on basic cooking aspects. You know, how complex it is to remove additives, for example. That's where we are. We're still working on these things, and we're also doing research on how to build up trust, how to personalize, customize information. Philippe Crovazier, we were talking about Actifry earlier on. I'd like to talk about another project that is finished but is continuing, the RICE project that combines pleasure and health. So it's been certified by Vitagora. Whereabouts are you with this rice project? Well, what's interesting with rice is that rice is a worldwide food. And again, what's interesting is when you look at different countries, when you act as an anthropologist, you realize there isn't one way of cooking rice according to each country. The Japanese have their way of eating rice, the Koreans theirs, the Chinese theirs, the Americans theirs. So this means that there are a lot more things that can be explored. It means that we can have products that we can then adapt in terms of results. So we can have a kind of meeting between the ingredient, the cooking method, so that we can give the consumer the kind of rice that they like, so that we can provide the consumer with health aspects as well. So this is what the study has allowed us to do, and we should come up with a product between now and the next 2 years. And that's going to be advantageous for us. It's going to allow us to renew what we say about rice in countries where there is a high level of rice consumption. I believe there's still a prototype on the Vitagora stand. Yes, we lost it, but we found it again, so we've got the prototype. Maybe it was a competitor who nabbed it. I'd just like to add something. Earlier on, when we were talking about stalemates, we can see when we work on ingredients and products and digital aspects, there are 2 kinds of stalemates. First of all, we might believe that the product can do everything. It's what we were saying earlier on, you know, you delegate everything, you externalize everything, whereas we know that what consumers like to do when they're cooking something is to change what they're doing, to adapt it according to the recipe. In fact, the wealth of connected objects and digital possibilities means that we're going to be able to make sure that we target our populations according to whether they're beginners or whether they are people who have a lot of cooking experience. That's going to be possible, and that's the kind of thing that we're working on. We'll be able to get back to something that's also important, teach them to cook. We were talking about this earlier on. One of the wealths of the project is to work on teaching people to cook and work on building up their confidence in what they're doing. So the idea being to encourage people to cook more and more at home. Now the second point that is a stalling point and that is often present in the digital field concerns confidentiality of data. But it's a bit of a give-give situation. If I give a lot of information, that means that the result is going to be highly in line with the profile that you have defined. So it's true. But you have to guarantee confidentiality of everything that's exchanged. And a lot of progress has been made in this area over the last few years in terms of information confidentiality. So that's going to be important. All of these systems need to build the consumer's trust. Nathalie, when you have consumers ringing you up, what do they say? Well, yes, they ring up because they have questions that may be very simple or complex. Sometimes we even provide online coaching when there's a health problem. So they ask for lots of practical information, but also for lots of guidance. And as soon as we have to focus on more complex health issues, what we see is that there is this expectation linked to any kind of anxiety and media coverage of certain issues. You know, what they hear in the media is important, but there's also this work on making them more aware of eating more healthily. We have a lot of questions about children, what they should eat. And, you know, as adults, they do certain things, but what about for their children? So, there are many priorities, allergies, how to manage allergies. Now, obviously, it's important to distinguish between food poisoning and allergy. Diets, that's another issue. You know, what is behind a certain diet. The notion of portions as well is something that comes on. There is a big difficulty, especially that is linked to labeling. You know, they want to know the right kind of doses according to age, and that's where connected nutrition is interesting, because you can profile and adapt portions. There is no good or bad product. You've got the right proportion, the right portion and the right frequency in order to increase variety so that the diet is more balanced. So True Food, this book that you wrote with the team, is inspired by that. Yes, the observation was as follows. Okay, every day we've got these requests coming in, multiple varied requests, so we got together. And we drafted this book. We took 10 subjects, organic products, GMOs made in France, and we focused on a technical issue, the problem of animal flour, the problem of flowers, and we tried to identity things at European, national and World Health Organization level, and then we tried to look at the possible answers from a practical point of view that would be a good idea to give to consumers. For example, answers about clear answers about what can be given to children. So perhaps we'll open up to the audience now. I know that many people will have to be leaving soon, so perhaps it's time to open up the floor to a debate.
Non, tout le monde a parfaitement compris. Personne ne veut apporter
une critique. Well, it seems that everyone is fine with what we said.
Précision.
No need for more accuracy.
Je vous en prie.
Can I just add one, please? One comment.
Quelque chose à ça parce que je crois que on a beaucoup parlé du consommateur.
We talked a lot about consumers.
De recherche, de
about research, about solutions. Now, this is also something which is going to change in economic terms. The full economy, or the complete economy of this chain will not be the same. It's not going to be the same with the digital world as it was with the non-digital world. Until now, we've been working with separate solutions, and we, so to speak, work with the building blocks to try and offer the customer a personalized answer. Now, things are going to change in terms of value. The service part will be by far bigger. It will get a bigger share, so there'll be a transfer of value. And in terms of economy, this is going to change a lot. The last thing. And this, it's an opportunity for us. It's an opportunity. If you work in the field of machine tools, for example, it's better to be a German, and if you work in food and cooking, it's better to be French. So I think we are on our grounds, and I think we have to take this opportunity. We can offer a lot indeed. Would the sociologist do something? Or Monsieur Girard?
Monsieur Girard, je veux lui demander une conclusion.
Monsieur Girard, if you have a conclusion, we'll wait later. Well, again, to get you back on the relationship between pleasure and health, which is in fact the subject of my research work, I am currently working on the notion of so-called nutritional empowerment. In fact, everything is got to do with control. The eater is going to retrieve the control of food by homemade food, but also in the relationships he may have with producers or manufacturers. So it's just by reinforcing this control that things will change and behaviors will change. This is an hypothesis which has not yet been validated from the scientific point of view, but I believe there will be indeed a stronger action in terms of change if we just modify the relationship between the producer and the eater, rather than by introducing more information about what's good or what's bad. That is by a more cognitive dimension of the process. This is my current area of research, and more particularly with public, vulnerable public, actually, with the vulnerable citizens. But this is also something which is of interest for the population at large. Mr. Girard, would you like to conclude?
Non.
Oh, I dare not conclude. But
c'est intéressant d'ailleurs de ces regards.
It was very interesting to compare our visions or individual visions of what is food and nutrition, which is part of life. It's like, you know, in France we're lucky because we have both craftsmen and industrialists, so we don't want to have them compete. I know of no one who can really make a close distinction between the two. So we have to keep these two aspects. It's a strength for us.
Et au travers de ce que l'on voit, c'est que c'est la notion du temps.
It seems that the notion of time is very important. You have time or you have no time.
And le petit déjeuner, en fait, par rapport à cette notion du temps.
Our breakfast, luncheons and dinners are organized in function of the time we have.
Que je préside au niveau national, et on a mis dedans
it so happened that we have a national plan for industry, and food has been considered at all ages of life in this plan, which means that we have, of course, a growing knowledge of baby food, of teenage food. We have a growing knowledge of satiety, of senior economy, so-called senior economy.
So, au-delà du produit, une solution.
I think it's a win-win strategy because we offer solutions at a given time or for a given age. Thinking of allergies, if you are affected by the celiac disease, for example, with a connected device, in just a few clicks, you know what to do or not to do, what to eat or not to eat. And
l'alimentation, c'est la vie.
I would say that food is life. This is what we should remember, first and foremost. So the French food model should be proud and is of interest to the rest of the world.
Je voudrais que Madame la Présidente
Thank you to all our panelists. I'd like the chairman of this conference and the chair lady rather and the chair lady of the scientific committee come up for a few words of conclusion. Let me first of all thank our speakers for this high-quality panel discussion. This is now the conclusion of the plenary part of this conference, but this is not quite over. Life goes on. We have visits of various companies for the afternoon schedule. We will visit the Chocolaterie de Bourgogne, the Burgundy chocolate factory. We will visit the university where we will see plenty of things. So we would like to thank you all for this participation. We were many, very many. The number is not what counts, in fact it's quality. So quality, exchanges, projects, all presented at Vitagora. So this is just a place for us to seed the various seeds. We didn't mention agronomy this year, but it's a subject which is also of interest to us. And we're, so to speak, picking the fruit. And we are both sowing and picking the fruit of our seeds. Now comes the reward ceremony. We need the two sponsors on the podium. Having Philippe and Jean-Philippe on the podium would be fine. This is very good to have them along with the nominees,
nous aurons un petit cocktail déjeunatoire.
And then we will continue with a light lunch. So we will meet next year, but in Milan, and I hope we are going to be as many. And we will certainly have a lot of scientific topics to talk about, as well as business issues. Let me thank all the speakers yesterday for the scientific sessions. Everyone, I think, has acknowledged the fact that we had high-quality presentations. So I'd like to thank all the speakers for participating. And I think they also enjoyed the various exchanges that have taken place between the various aspects of our participants, the research workers, industrialists, in the field of health, nutrition, foodstuff, etc. So I think that this Vitagora conference is now known as a place for exchange in this area. The business meetings are also very successful. So anyway, we'll meet next year, and I would like to thank Vitagora for organizing this. Okay, now we move to the Vitagora booth for the reward ceremony for the companies that have an interest in our connected future. Thank you.